I was recently blessed to get to go on an international trip. And one of the stops that we got to go to is Moscow, Russia. In Moscow, there are murals from the Soviet era, murals that are part of an artistic style called socialist realism. And these are murals that depict the common everyday people of the Soviet Union rising up against capitalism and rising up against greed. Another one of our stops was Vienna, Austria. And in Vienna, we got to go to this magnificent palace called Schönbrunn Palace. And this is the castle that's the ancestral homes of the Habsburgs. And there are these rose gardens and these fabulous monuments to the family's wealth. These elite European nobility that took the goods and the services of all the people of the kingdoms of Austria and Hungary and consolidated all of this wealth into this fabulous palace for their family. There's even this grand party palace at the top of the hill that looks back down on the entire city of Vienna. And these are two stories. One's the story of a great ancestral European nobility power, and the other is the story of a proletarian revolution that destroyed a czar and his family and seized the means of production for themselves and tried to create a communist utopia. And both of those two stories are stories about leaders that steal wealth from the people. I mean, in the end, the Habsburg family would have simply taken what was not rightfully theirs from the hands of serfs and everyday people, and the communists did just the same, consolidated it in the power of people who were good with the party. Both of them are problematic when you go to these places, even if the art or the architecture is beautiful. It's a part of the heritage of these two countries that we have to criticize.
When Jesus talks to his disciples, he re-summarizes the commandments in a lot of different ways. And in Matthew 6, he's re-summarizing the familiar commandment about not stealing. Jesus says, I want you not to store up treasures on earth, because moths can come in and eat your valuable wooden or cloth possessions. Thieves could break into your house and take your valuable gold or silver objects. Instead, I want you to store up treasure in heaven. I want you to store up treasure in a place where thieves can't come to steal. Moths can't eat away at your valuable possessions, and rust won't take anything from you. What Jesus is saying is, I want you to take a different look at how you think of your possessions and the things that you want. Theft is the taking of something that's not yours. And Jesus says, I want you to imagine all of life as a gift. Everything you have, everything you own, everything that you think you have control over is ultimately God's. So Jesus says, don't think about the things that you have as having anything to do with who you really are. Those things can be taken away from you. Somebody could steal them and moths could eat them, rust could take it. Jesus instead says, I want you to think about treasures in heaven as your real possessions, your real inheritance, your real retirement plan. Jesus says, when you do righteous things, when you do the will of his Father in heaven, you're storing up treasure, the treasure that can't be taken away. Reconceptualize the way you think about ownership. It's not possible for you to be jealous of something that you don't really want. Jesus says, I want you to think about a world where everything is God's property to begin with. How would it be possible for there to be theft if we lived in a world where everything was already the property of God and we were simply stewards of that? I'm reminded of these big political movements where the king or the queen or the czar, and then eventually the commissar or the leader of the party, determine for all the people what should belong to who. It's a limited system. It's imperfect. Even if there's a good law and a good king, even if there was a good political ideology and a good party, ultimately we'd be faced with the same kind of problem. The problem that the Austrians faced, the problem that the Soviets faced, the problem that all of this stuff doesn't ultimately satisfy us. There will be thieves, there will be moths, there will be rust, there will be shrink in our inventory. And ultimately, because we put our value on those material things, we're deeply dissatisfied. Jesus says your treasure is in relationship to God. It's in relationship to one another. That treasure can't be taken away. It can't rust. It can't be stolen. We become thieves when we think that we have a handle on the wrong kind of political ideology, materialist ideology. We think that we're secure in our promises, the promises of a bank, the promises of a government, the promises of a deal, a handshake deal with somebody that we care about. What Jesus tells us is these things will pass. None of it is ultimately worth our time or attention. We are no better than thieves when we devote our lives, our hearts, to material things of this world that will pass away. We're no better than thieves when we spend our time attached to a political ideology to distribute wealth in this direction or that one. We're no better than thieves when we dedicate our lives to something that's not worth dedicating our time to. Instead, living as honest citizens in the kingdom of God means recognizing that possessions mean so little to begin with. And that's a hard truth. I like my stuff, and I think you do too. But Jesus' message is to put your treasure and your heart in the right place, in the heavenly place. In this way, theft isn't just avoiding stealing things from others, which is very important. Theft is also thinking that my treasure is where it shouldn't be. Putting all of my time and my attention and my resources into my 401k, into my bank account, into gifts for myself, for others, in a political ideology that aggregates wealth to the 1% or confiscates wealth for the proletariat. All of these are versions of the same violation of the same commandment. Jesus says that 8th commandment, that we shouldn't steal, it's a commandment that says we should not put our treasure in the wrong place. Put your treasure in heavenly places. Put your stock and your trust in the Lord. Nothing will ever be stolen from God. Nothing will ever rot away in the kingdom of God. That's the message that Jesus has for us. That's the way we can see this commandment in our time.